Welcome to episode 8 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. And Brennan, once again, ownership news to talk about. Bids are kind of in limbo right now. There's been 4 that have been submitted, and this is turning into an ownership podcast. So we obviously have another update on the Neko Sparks bid that we'll get into. But how are you doing on this Friday, May 19th?
Doing well, doing well. Yeah, I mean, just today we've got another ownership piece of info we're going to talk about, and I think we're into maybe the final week now of this whole 6 month whatever it is process where it just keeps dragging on, and the bank is kind of delaying it in the timelines, and it's getting a little tiresome to talk about it. I kind of want to get into who the actual owner is instead of just speculation, but yeah, I mean, we're into the final week now, so it's time to get excited.
Yeah, and we've got that to talk about, and also the NHL's conference finals have kicked off. We had Florida going to 4 overtimes and taking it over Carolina last night. And then obviously you got Dallas and Vegas tonight. So we're going to touch on those 4 teams a little bit. And then we'll get into some Sens comparisons with those guys maybe. So, but we will start with the Sparks news. Donovan Bailey, Canadian legend, is joining the Neko Sparks group. And I'm going to read what he tweeted just earlier today. I'm so excited to announce that I'll be joining the first Black-led ownership group with Snoop Dogg and Neko Sparks in our bid to purchase the Ottawa Senators. So, Brennan, another big name joining in the midst. I'd say this one is a little bit more, maybe not local to Ottawa, but he's Canadian, and I think it's just a great play by the Sparks group, and it makes me think how many other people they kind of maybe have that haven't really made it public, just in their consortium.
Yeah, it feels like every day they're announcing somebody new has joined the mix. So it is interesting how public they've gone with it. I mean, compared to other groups, like you don't hear much from the Kimmel brothers or anything from those groups or Steve Apostolopoulos or however you say his name there. But this group has gone really public, and I know some people see it as like a desperation play of sorts, where it's almost like they're just kind of saying everybody and everything they're doing, and then there's questions about the financial stakes of it all. But I mean, I don't know. I see this is a good thing. Like, this is Donovan Bailey's a big name. I mean, he's a huge guy in Canada. He's a gold medalist, an Olympic gold medalist, and I think he's won multiple. And he's a legend. He's like a Hall of Famer, or whatever it is for the Olympics. So, yeah, you just have to think if this group wins, like, would you not be excited about how many? I know there's a lot of people, but I would be so excited about the marketing and about you're going to be seeing a lot of celebrities and kind of like big names around the Sens and attached to the Sens now. And that's a big deal. I mean, like, I keep coming back to the marketing because imagine how much these guys can do just by like retweeting, right? I mean, some of these guys have tons of followers on social media, let alone actually going out and doing events in the community and in Ottawa and stuff. So I think Donovan Bailey's a big one, but yeah, we could go through the list. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. And they have a lot of investors, but they have a lot of celebrities and big names attached as well.
Yeah, I don't actually have the list in front of me, but just like quickly on Donovan Bailey, immediately I thought of Ben Johnson, the guy who was suspended after winning a gold medal for Canada for PED use, and I thought it was him, and I was like, oh no, are they bringing that guy in? That's a little strange, but no, it's Donovan Bailey, a gold medalist, an Olympian gold medalist who's from Canada. So same story. I just mixed up the names there, but yeah, I mean, like, I think Olympic athletes are a different kind of marketing, if that makes sense. Like Andre DeGrasse or is the big Canadian track star now, and it's like he's a household name, which I don't think you can kind of, yeah, you could say like Snoop Dogg I think is a celebrity, but like household name's different than celebrity to me. You know what I mean? Like, in especially when it comes to sports, like I would say that no one on the Ottawa Senators, maybe except for Erik Karlsson, can say is a household name outside of Ottawa. And I'm not making a comparison, obviously, that this is like an Erik Karlsson level athlete in the NHL. It's just interesting. It's a different angle that they're taking. And I don't know if you have the list there in front of you of all the investors, like you mentioned. Like, there's been a lot of names, a lot of name drops. You got to watch your feet around these guys because like there's been like this group alone has maybe 20. I want to say. I don't know if they've all been named.
No, yeah, I know they have money coming from Canada, the US, and the UK, and again, like, it's not all confirmed. I mean, there's been a lot of rumors. Like, it started with the rumor of The Rock being involved, and then it kind of went from there. So we do know, I don't have the list, but I kind of have seen it so many times now that I've made a mental note of it. Like, they've got And what I like is they've got a lot of sports people, right? Like it's not just celebrities who don't have anything to do with sports. It's actual like sports and hockey people, which is really interesting to me because the Sens need to expand the hockey operations side of their off ice operations. So yeah, they've got Grant Fuhr, they've got James Neal, Matthias Nordstrom is the big one because he's friends with Daniel Alfredson. We talked about this a little bit on the members pod too, which is coming out tomorrow. But these guys have all played like serious time in the NHL. I mean, Nordstrom was the captain of the LA Kings, and again, those LA ties with this group. They've got Daniel Cherry, who is the chief executive of marketing for the Devils, I believe, and now he's with Adidas. And then the list goes on. Like, it's just now they've got Donovan Bailey. So, I mean, there's so many people involved with this. And again, what is their actual stake? I don't know. I mean, Donovan Bailey is probably holding a small stake in the grand scheme of things here, but like there's still a lot you can do, right? There's still going to be attached to the Sens and around this team. So I would be interested to see if those other groups who are being a lot more quiet about their operations have added anyone else too. I know Michael Andlauer kind of feels like the front runner to me, and by speculation he is right now, but he's been silent in regards to if he's added anyone compared to like even the Kimmel brothers have added the weekend, right? I mean, I'm interested to see if Andlauer is going to kind of add anybody too, or who his investors are. But I think each group is really offering a lot here, and I think we should be happy regardless of who ends up taking over.
Yeah, and we've talked about it's going to be a good situation regardless. And yeah, we can pick our favorites. And honestly, part of this process has been how long it's been or how long it's taken and still is taking. So obviously, we're going to be talking about it and talking about what our favorite group is. But I don't really like hate the idea of, I guess, people being quiet. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's a bad play because quite honestly, they only need to appeal to a group of 5 people who are deciding. They don't need to be like pandering to the fans because the fans don't get to pick. So I think maybe I'm not necessarily against the Sparks group. I don't have a problem with it, but I would say that that's probably what people are concerned about is it really does feel like a bit of a PR stunt. The whole like it's very, very public and very recently too, right? Like it's been what 2 weeks since Snoop Dogg kind of came out and said everything. So like I don't know. I don't know if you feel the same, but it feels very PR stunty to me. Where I don't know what and we were kind of talking before we recorded about Ian Mendez and the thread he had just on Twitter. You know, he made good points. Like I don't know how many things these guys are legally bound that they can't say and can say. Like just seems very strange. Like you're right. Like there's definitely other investors and probably high profile names with the other groups that haven't really said anything. Like the weekend hasn't said anything. It was
No,
just
it's
a
just
report.
weird. It's just weird that this one group is saying a lot compared to the other groups, right? Because I mean, it's bizarre to begin with because there's a non-disclosure agreement in place. So technically, they're not supposed to be leaking information about like anything, right? I mean, we don't know exactly what the terms are on that NDA, but I don't think they're supposed to be going public, which is probably why the other groups aren't, right? And then this group's kind of just going out with it and actually getting like they're not just saying Neko Sparks isn't just saying, "Oh, we've got this person." The actual people themselves are tweeting it out. It's almost like they're being told, like, "Yeah, go public with the fact that you're with us." And Snoop, I mean, the thought is that he joined them probably months ago. It wasn't just like a sudden thing that he decided to do, and he was quiet at first. So that's when the timing of it, kind of like Reynolds dropping out, the timing of it was just bizarre. Like, why would you randomly announce this publicly at this point in the process? It's very, I don't know. I hope they come out with reasoning after this process is over and kind of like how it all played out, because it's very interesting when you actually look at the timelines of how things have come out. Regardless, I mean, I guess they're not getting in trouble for it from what we know. It doesn't seem like there's any repercussions for saying they've got people involved. Like you said, it doesn't really matter what the public thinks. I mean, everybody wanted Reynolds and he dropped out, so it doesn't really matter what we think. It just comes down to the actual board and the bank and the Melnicks and their whole kind of board of governors and choosing who they want to be the next owners. So, I mean, go public with it all you want, but I don't think it really makes that much of a difference in the long run.
That's the thing. It's like the more people that they say are involved, and like I don't know. I'm looking at this tweet and it's on Donovan Bailey's Twitter, and it's like I obviously read it before, but it's just a picture of Snoop himself and then Neko Sparks, and it's like I don't know. I mean, this doesn't move a needle for me either way. It's just kind of a and that's the thing. I think that kind of just exposes what I was kind of saying. Like, it doesn't matter if there's a celebrity involved, and like all we're doing, like if okay, let's say Reynolds was just tweeted in the next hour and tweeted out like, "Oh, I'm joining Michael Andlauer or whatever." Like again, doesn't change anything for us, and we can't really do anything about it. Yeah, we can start salivating at the potential. Like if another celebrity tacked on to Neko Sparks and they had, some kind of background in the sports industry, blah, blah, like anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Like that at that point, we'd be like be able to I guess fantasize about what they were gonna bring. But and no offense again to Donovan Bailey, but it's like I don't think this merited an announcement. I guess that's kind of just what I wanted to say. And now, like you said, the timing's very, very strange. Um, in the middle of when they've already submitted the bids. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, neither do I. I don't know. I mean, it's exciting anyways. Like we can just be positive about it. It doesn't really matter, but it is exciting just because again, if you looked back even like a year or two ago, you wouldn't expect to be here where you're seeing household Canadian legends, wanting to get in on part of the Senators. And of course, with this Neko Sparks group, a lot of it too, it's not just the Sens, but it's trying to change the game of hockey. Like even in his tweet, right, he said that he was joining a group who's built of primarily people of color, right, instead of just the prototypical hockey ownership groups, and they're trying to change the game and make it more diverse and more, inclusive for kids of different backgrounds and multicultural communities. So with that Sparks group too, we had the First Nations group community too. We didn't mention that, but they've been having talks with the First Nations group. Maybe you could pull up the name there. But yeah, and that's another investor, and people again kind of met that with concern because it's another person at the table, and it sounds like there's going to be just an absurd amount of people making decisions. Again, if they win, like I'm sure they're going to come out and kind of tell us the plan, because I don't think they're going to set themselves up for failure where they've got a ton of people putting input in and making decisions. I think they're going to have, the head and kind of who's actually deciding on things and more of a clear plan, because as we've seen, when you have a ton of people at the table, it rarely works out well because eventually that group just crumbles and they butt heads. So with that group, I mean, I don't know. I still feel like Andlauer's the front runner right now based on what we've seen. But yeah, it feels like Neko Sparks and his consortium they're putting together a famous bunch for sure. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, and you make a good point there actually. Like the big draw of the Sparks group is not how many and who is involved. It's the diversity that they're promoting. And I should have mentioned this at the start, honestly. Donovan Bailey, Canadian star, but he's a black Canadian star. So, I think Snoop and Nico have talked about diversifying the game in the United States and kind of doing like a youth football league kind of thing. That's been a loose proposal, it sounds like. But Donovan Bailey grew up in Canada. He's a Canadian who's an he's a black Canadian. So I think it's inspiring for kids of color in Canada, which I think is another thing that people are probably worried about with this Sparks group. So you can kind of have, oh yeah, I'm worried that he's LA based. It's not based in Canada, but he's bringing people in who are from Ottawa, from the community. Like you can't look the other way at that. So to me, that's very important too. Like if you can have one of the most successful Black Canadian athletes as part of your group, it should, in theory, just start another wave of young Canadian Black athletes who can play hockey instead.
Yeah, and that is important. That we should have talked about that from the beginning. That's kind of the big note. And I think it's just being Canadian because, yes, like you said, one of the biggest concerns with this group was that they were LA based. Like Snoop Dogg and Neko Sparks and a lot of the other people rumored to be involved are American based, and people don't generally like that because, of course, there's a lot of talk about relocation. Now, one of the agreements in place is that the Sens can't be relocated. Once the owners take over, they have to stay in Ottawa. But there's still the concern of, the long-term projection and would they prefer to try and do something down the line, whatever. It is a rightful concern, but yeah, I think this is kind of a big move. And again, maybe it's posturing by the group just to kind of put people's concerns to rest, where it's like, okay, let's bring on a Canadian to try and get people on board with this. But regardless, I mean, having a Canadian superstar like that on board, it pushes the local things in the right direction, right? It makes the group more local and it allows somebody to put input in for Canada, right? Because I don't know how many other people this group has who are actually Canadian and know what they're talking about for Canada. So yeah, I don't know. For me, that's pretty much all I've got on it because it's an exciting point. But for now, until it's actually announced, there's not a whole lot we can really dive into about the operations moving forward.
Yeah, I was gonna say we kind of milked 14 minutes out of that, but hey, like ownership stuff keeps coming. We're gonna talk about it. So Donovan Bailey joins the Neko Sparks bid, and we will find out more maybe by next podcast we have a clear winner. We'll see. All right, let's get into what I mentioned before, the Final Four in the NHL. It's Florida, Carolina, which obviously wrapped up game one last night. They basically played game two as well, with four overtimes, almost five. And Matthew Tkachuk ends that one, obviously. And then Dallas and Vegas tonight. So, Brennan, we're going to talk about the Ottawa Senators in comparison to these Final Four. And it's kind of, we're gonna come at it with the angle of what team do they most resemble that's left. And I would argue that maybe I think Florida's getting hot at the right time, but there's been a good team all year. They're getting goaltending now. But I'd say all four of these teams had great regular seasons, were the top dogs. You know, you've got Carolina, who was second best in the league. Vegas won the Pacific. Dallas was leading the Central for a good while, and they kind of just slipped off at the end. Like, these were all cup contending teams all season. And, you know, Florida won the President's Trophy last year. So they're strong comparisons. There isn't a team there that I would look at and say, you know, that's a fluke or whatever like that, right? So the question is going to be just what team in the Final Four most resembles the Ottawa Senators. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, just tag us on Twitter or anything with your opinion, because I'm curious. I don't think there's a wrong answer. There's not a right answer. And leave a comment on the YouTube. Just who do you think of the Final Four the Ottawa Senators most resemble with their core? So Brendan, go ahead.
I'm looking just at the lineups of the four playoff teams, and it's interesting to see like the stat comparisons to Ottawa, because like Dallas and Florida both had one player who scored 109 points, and then the next player was like 30 points below that player. So they basically have one superstar, and then it doesn't drop off, but it's like the rest of the players are well below that one superstar. And I kind of see that as Tim Stützle for Ottawa, where Tim's going to be that guy who's scoring like 110 points, and then the next player is going to be at 80 or 90. And yeah, I think I look at it, and it is hard because I don't watch all of these teams' games, but just looking at the rosters, I do think they resemble Dallas, and I think they have some resemblance to Florida as well. But yeah, I don't know. You look at the top six in Dallas and in Florida, and the top six is pretty good, right? Now, I think where Ottawa is lacking is depth, and we can kind of get into that. But with Dallas especially, you look at their defense, right? And you've got Miro Heiskanen back there. They've got a really good top four, and I think Ottawa's going to kind of follow that path too, where their top four is going to be one of the best in the league once Sanderson develops a little bit more. If you look at Vegas, I've got all four lineups pulled up. So Vegas was interesting because their top scorer this year had 66 points, and like nobody else was over a point per game at all. Nobody on their team was over a point per game. So they're all depth, right? And it's the same with Carolina. I mean, Carolina's lineup right now, they have Stefan Noesen on their first line and Jordan Martinook on their second line. These guys scored 35 points each in the regular season. But yet Carolina, to me, is arguably the favorite. Like, I really like Carolina's team, even though they have these players who are generally like fourth line, third line players, and they're on their first line. It's just depth, right? It's balance. So it's really interesting to look at each lineup and how they have different balance groups, and then there's the superstar groups. And Toronto is a good example of the superstar group, where in Tampa too, where they have these big names at the top of their lineups, right? And it's like you look on paper and they stand out compared to a Carolina, for example, because you see the Austin Matthews, you see the Steven Stamkos, right? But then these teams get bounced early. Now Tampa won, but their roster was a little more deep at that time. But I think there's a reason for that. And I think that kind of speaks to the argument of, okay, depth is maybe more important than having superstars filling your lineup, right? Like, I would argue that in the playoffs anyway, depth is absolutely more important. And for that reason, like, I really like the four remaining teams, and I really like Carolina and Dallas, especially because of their depth. And yeah, what do you think?
Okay, so I think that I like how you mentioned Florida and Dallas, and I'll just say I think Dallas, but I'm kind of going to the stars of last season. Like, they were a very top-heavy team, as in Pavelski, Hintz, and Jason Robertson carried them all season offensively. They had great years last year. And then they get to the playoffs, and Jake Ottinger is just a beast. So they were. I want to use last season because what they became this year with an elite coach in Pete DeBoer and more depth. But there was more to their extra depth, right? And I think I'm kind of rambling, but I think a team like Carolina could be a good example. Like, yeah, Tim Stützle's a star, but I would say that the Sens forward core might be built a bit more like Carolina in that sense. But like you mentioned, Carolina's depth is ridiculous and their blue line's ridiculous. Like maybe blue line wise, Ottawa could get there, but I think that that's where Carolina's strength is like all four lines. I'd even argue Florida, like you got a third line of I'm spitballing, but I think their third line is Sam Reinhart and then Lundell. Like it's obviously clicking right now. So anyway, I think Dallas because the Sens have a top line in Giroux, Stützle, Tkachuk. And then their second line this year was a struggle. It was DeBrincat, Batherson, and Pinto. Let's say that's Josh Norris. I'm looking at Dallas, and they have, I think, Sege on that line, and I think Jamie Benn's in there somewhere. Those guys had bad years last year, which is why they weren't a deep team. And then they stepped up this year. So it wasn't so much Dallas going out and getting better depth, even though they did sign a guy. They got Mason Marchment, which is a good ad. Like it was a mix of adding better pieces, but also your current pieces just coming back off of a down year. So all that to say, I think that's why I think the Sens have the potential to be like the Dallas Stars. Like Drake Batherson could be like a Tyler Seguin and just have a bounce back season and get back to what we think he was, even though he had 62 points, right? Like I think that is maybe a bit more of a loose comparison. But where I really like it is Miro Heiskanen and Jake Sanderson. I think those two are neck and neck kind of. And I know that Sanderson, either in his draft profile or his rookie season freshman season in North Dakota, I know he mentioned Heiskanen as one of the guys who he kind of models his game after. So that Dallas is just my pick. The only obviously outlier is Jake Ottinger, and he could honestly be the Stars' best player. And the Sens don't have that. So that's the only difference. But I'd say in net, probably more like Carolina, like a solid team, but just not a star goalie really. But again, it's all very loose. I think it's interesting because I think every team in the NHL that isn't in the Final Four is looking at the current Final Four being like, what can we do differently? It happens every year and it will keep happening.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned Carolina because I do think goaltending is one important note here. That the Sens, like if you kind of compare them to these teams, their goaltending is a little bit worse than any of these teams. Like you've got Ottinger, you've got Bobrovsky, you've got who is starting. I guess Vegas only has Aiden Hill right now. And then interestingly about Carolina is Freddie Anderson and then Antti Ranta, who I think either of them could actually be playing for Ottawa next year. I mentioned them in an article just because they're both pending free agents and they kind of fit the bill as like that short-term, cheap kind of goaltender who can fill the role as you can see in Carolina, right? They're not going to carry you, but they can be good enough. In tandem with Forsberg would be a pretty interesting ad. I would ask you, so you think that depth is a lot more important than superstar power in the playoffs, right? Like
I do, yeah. Overall.
Yeah, because I mean, like if you go through Carolina, like I said, you've got Nosen and you've got Martinook and you've got Jesper Fast on the second line too. So their top six forward group consists of Stefan Nosen, Jordan Martinook, Jesper Kotkaniemi, Jesper Fast, and then Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis. So it's like those players are not top six players, yet Carolina's so good. And why is that? Well, if you go to their third line, you've got Teravainen, Stahl, and Natchez on the third line. Now, this kind of begs the question of for Ottawa, and you look at like their lineup on paper, and a lot of the time people are underwhelmed because the bottom six is so bad, and it was last year. I mean, for a lot of the year, Dylan Gambrell was on the third line, Patrick Brown was on the third line, right? This just shouldn't be happening. Even Mark Kastelic shouldn't be on the third line, and that was how their group was kind of set up all year. And yes, injuries played a factor, but it kind of compares to like if Matthew Joseph, when he was on the first line 2 years ago, I guess now, and he did really well on that first line in that role. That's kind of what the Hurricanes are doing and how they're being successful is they're balancing it so that they can create optimal matchups. Because if you have each line, and even though, you know, your top two lines might not be quite as good overall, if they can be good enough to create an optimal matchup against whoever they're playing against, and you have that for all four lines, you're in a great spot. And that's what you want to do. That's what you want to build. That's why I think, too, like putting Batherson on the third line this year, he did better when he was on the third line than the second line when they split it up, right? Because he then gets an easier matchup, and everybody around him gets an easier matchup, and it's just more optimal. So for me, like, I'm about balance. I mean, I don't think you have to stack that top six group. If it's struggling next year, change it up. Because this year, they really stuck with that group. They did not change that second line enough. That DeBrincat Pinto Batherson line, they weren't working and they didn't change it. Like they had like a negative 11 goal differential, I think it was at 5v5, and they just kept playing it. It's like switch it up, balance it out. No, Matthew Joseph doesn't look as good in a top 6 role on paper, but it's probably going to help your group on the ice, right? If you can split that up and create balance. So for me, go for balance, and I think that does come back to solidifying your bottom 6 next year. I think that was it just wasn't good enough this past year. I think you got to sign somebody, and you got to hope somebody like a Sokolov or a Crookshank can step up and be a filler in that role for you.
Yeah, there's a lot of ifs, I think, for the Sens' top 9 forwards, but you're right. Like, come playoff time, you need to be able to confidently move that top 9 around, because I don't think 2-line teams can win the cup, but 3-line teams can. You think about a rotation, if you're rotating those 3 lines pretty regularly and then subbing in the 4th line for a 30-second shift here and there, that's ideal. And I would argue that the Sens have that going into next year if everyone just comes back, even if they don't add to their depth. Like you can have a Kachuk, Giroux, Stützle, Norris, DeBrincat, Batherson, let's say to start, Pinto, Joseph, Sokolov. Like that kind of top 9 is good. And it's why I kind of mentioned Florida, right? Like that 3rd line, you got Sam Reinhart, who's he's a 2nd-line center on any team. And then you've got Anton Lundell and Luosterainen, I think. So 2 young guys. But they're playing like a top line. So you need, I think going into this year, I was very excited, or last season, I should say, I was very excited about the Sens top 6, but the top 9 was the most enticing thing because that 3rd line, especially in preseason, remember how good they were? Like Joseph, Maude, and Pinto. So, yeah, like I would say that like depth-wise, the Sens are closer than we might think, even though they do need to revamp that bottom 6 a little bit. But it's just a couple small tweaks. Like it's maybe sign a guy for the 3rd line, but I don't know. I like the makeup of. I mean, DeBrincat's a huge question mark, obviously, but if that gets answered, like it's I can see this team succeeding in the playoffs with a matchup game because that's what the playoffs are, like you mentioned.
I just find it so fascinating because you talked about Florida and they've got that 3rd line of Reinhart, Lundell, and Luosterainen because Nick Cousins is playing on the 2nd line. And Nick Cousins scored 27 points in a full season this season. Like he's a 4th line player essentially, but he's in the 2nd line role and he's doing well in that role because you have a balance. He's playing with good players, right? Now, it's interesting looking at these lines because every group is doing this now. And we praised Ottawa for building this top 6 forward group, and the Leafs do it too, where you build this really just this powerhouse top 6 group, and you saw with Tampa this year as well. And it just doesn't work in the playoffs. Like, it does not work in the playoffs. And in Ottawa, I mean, it didn't even work for them in the regular season this year. They needed to split it up. So, for me, yeah, I mean, this is honestly a little telling when you look at the lines of these Final Four teams because they all have this playbook they're using where they're creating matchups. And does that come back to coaching too on DJ Smith? Was he not recognizing it and not balancing the lines as he should have been? I mean, a little bit, I think. I think that's one of his weaknesses is recognizing that and adapting.
Yeah, I will say though, I think of all these teams, right? Like look at them and their strength is out the middle. Like you're listing all these lines and just spitballing. You're not saying, oh, this guy's their 2nd-line center, right? Like there's a common theme. It's that 1, 2, and 3 down the middle are 1, 2, 3 centermen. Maybe like, Reinhardt's a 2nd-line or 1st-line center playing 3rd line, but you know what I mean? Like there's no question marks in the middle. It's the wingers. So I'll defend DJ just because he didn't have Norris all season. And when he did is when the Sens were doing their best, right? It was that early part of October when they could roll out all 3. So I think, again, and I'm going to give them credit because they obviously didn't do it by accident, the team drafted for the middle of the ice and traded for Norris for the middle of the ice. Like it's important. And I think if you can build through that and then just fill in the blanks on the wing, that's kind of what they're going for. So if Stützle, Pinto, and Norris stay healthy all year next year, I think of all the factors, that gives the team the best chance to make the playoffs, honestly.
It does, and it just goes with everything else too. Like they're a much better team than they were at the start of last year, I think, just based on, like, if you count Norris as being out going into last year, because he basically was. Like we're talking about Kachuk, Stützle, Giroux, right? You've got Kachuk, Stützle, Giroux, and then like DeBrincat, Norris, And again, I wouldn't mind if you signed a Brinket, like if you do DeBrinket Norris and then you put somebody else on the right wing and you put Batherson on the third line, like I wouldn't hate that because that line just, I don't know, like I'd be open to it, right? I'd be open to trying different things. But it does come back a lot of it to the goaltending. I mean, you can only do so much with the forward group. The forwards did, I mean, like they did fine, I guess, last year. I think the 5v5 scoring was a big thing. We talked about that. I don't think it's going to be that bad again. Your goaltending's a big thing. I think they have to go out and get one. Defense, I mean, Jake Sanderson can be expected to take another step, right? Like he can be expected to play bigger minutes. Shabbat's going to be playing less minutes. I think I'd be shocked if this group does make the playoffs next year, just because I compare them to some of the other rosters and on paper, and I look at them and I know they're younger than a lot of these teams, but to me they have the same talent, if not more, than a lot of the teams that made the playoffs this year. So if they fail to make the playoffs, like I can't blame it on the players again because it's just something else is wrong. Like this group should be making the playoffs. I think as long as they stay healthy, because like you said, they're gonna have an excellent three forward core, right? Like you're gonna have Stützle, Norris, Pinto down the middle, which is a very good forward group, and even Kastelik on the fourth line. That's a really good forward center group. So I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, then yeah, somebody else needs to be held accountable because these players are good enough for it.
Okay, so I'm gonna do just before we wrap up. Three of the final four teams have one kind of pretty similar thing in common in how their this season played out for them, right? So aside from Vegas, you got Dallas, Florida, and Carolina, and all three of these teams are obviously up against the cap because everyone is like the Sens. All three of them had a rookie who was a top prospect come in and contribute. So for Florida, it's Louis Ryan, and not that he's putting up crazy numbers, but he's playing a top nine role on a team in the conference final. That's not nothing. And I'll get back to the other two teams, but like they went four overtimes last night. You can't play games like that and sit a line because like everyone's playing 45 minutes. So you have to have depth just to survive some of these games, right? Then I go to Dallas, Wyatt Johnson, kind of a sleeper rookie this year, and he had a beautiful goal last round in Game 7. Like he's playing with Sagan and or with Ben and Dadonov or something like. And then you've got Seth Jarvis in Carolina. Like the Sens, like you mentioned, are going to have one of the guys that we listed a couple episodes ago, a Sokolov, a Crookshank, a Tyler Boucher. Like someone's got to come in to the NHL and earn that spot and prove that the Sens don't need to go out and sign a guy for the third line or trade for a guy on the third line and that they can step in and do that. Because, like, why can't the Sens have a third line of Reinhart, Lundell, and Luostarinen with Pinto, Joseph, and Boucher or Sokolov or Yarventi? Like, I can keep going. You know what I mean? Like, the pieces are there. It's just a matter of how those pieces perform over the course of an 82 game schedule and then how they do in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's kind of why I say I think they can be as good as those teams because on paper, like, and even not even on paper, just in general, they look like they're similar, if not better, than a lot of these teams. I mean, they have the players to do it. Their roster is there. But yes, they do need somebody to step up because it's versatility. Like that's kind of the key word is versatility with these groups. When you have enough players to fill out your lineup and you're not just throwing in these kind of filler, like, not to call anybody out, but like a Patrick Brown is kind of just like a filler player you're using. He doesn't really allow you to move the lineup around very much. They've had a lot of those players. Watson was the same way. You can't put Austin Watson on your second line or you're it's just not, he doesn't do enough offensively. Like if you have players like the Nick Cousins of the world, they can do multiple things, right? They can play in an elevated role, which then allows somebody else to benefit more from it. Ottawa hasn't had those players in their bottom six for the duration of the rebuild. They've just been using filler players who aren't good enough to do anything more than a fourth line, capabilities. So I think if you can have, and again, they really should, like Sokolov, he's ready to step up. He's ready to earn that full-time role. I think he's proven it in Belleville. But even if he doesn't, like Crookshank, you've got Jarventi, you've got these players who somebody should be making the jump. At least one prospect should be making the jump this year. And worst comes to worst, then find somebody on the market. Like go out and find somebody and just get somebody that's going to give you versatility because they didn't have it last season and they were strapped because of it.
Just before we wrap up, obviously we're comparing the forward cores. We ended up doing that because I think that's biggest question mark in terms of the players, not goaltending for the Sens. But I have to say it's very nice to not be concerned about the blue line for the first time ever. Quite
Oh, I'm
honestly, like
confident. I'm
I've
confident about
never
the blue
been.
line.
I could tell you right now. I think the Sens blue line is as good or better. Not maybe not better, but as good as any of the four that are in the final four right now. 100%.
It's just an excellent, and not even just the top four. I keep saying top four because I'm just kind of forgetting about the bottom pairing. But Eric Brandstrom was one of their best defensemen last year, one of their best players. He was excellent, just very, very good, and could be a top four defenseman on a lot of teams. Like he'd be in that top four role on a lot of teams. So
So their D are built like we want the top nine to be built, right? Where you're not
yeah,
afraid to throw either pairing out. It's going to be
versatility.
exactly. It's going to be Shabbat Chikrin, Sanderson, Zub, and then Brandstrom. And I mean, Dorian said it's JBD's spot to lose. So Brandstrom JBD or Brandstrom Clevin, like you can't go wrong. And again, when you have a top nine forward group where you're not worried about throwing out a line to sacrifice offense in that top nine, it's the same thing about the defense. So you could just roll a pairing with a line every time and sub the fourth line here and there. Like
They all
the
provide
formula's
both
there.
ways. Yeah, they provide
Exactly.
offense and defense. Like that's what I mean is with this depth thing and versatility is that Ottawa's been like they'd have lines and groups where you'd put them on the ice and you would expect nothing in one end of the ice. You would expect no offense from them or no defense. You know something's going to go wrong. Like there's a lot of potential for failure. They shouldn't have that anymore. Their lineup really should be filled out. I like you said, it's awesome to feel good about the defense because it's been such a sore spot, and acquiring Chikrin really kind of solidified it in my mind. Now, questions about health are valid, like if Chikrin gets hurt, but I think that's comes with versatility too, is that if Chikrin gets hurt, I don't mind throwing Brandstrom on the right side into the top four, playing on the second pairing behind Zub with Sanderson or Shabbat. Like, I'd be comfortable with that. That's what I mean is having depth isn't just about creating matchups and stuff. It's these injuries that Ottawa saw last year. If they had better depth, they could have made up for it. They could have survived it. A lot of teams do every year, but they had no depth. So they ended up having to use these filler players who provide, very little really overall.
Well, again, quickly before we wrap up, but you want to talk about a team with depth? We barely even talked about Vegas. You said their top player had 66 points because no one played more than like 70 games.
Yep.
They were so hurt all year. Look at their goalies. Like Vegas is kind of the anti-Sens excuse, if that makes sense. Like every excuse we made or the Sens brass made about injuries this season, I would just point to the Vegas Golden Knights and be like, why didn't you win your division even though you had 5 goalies play for you this year? Or, so that I'm surprised actually I don't see more people bring that up because yeah, of course injuries crippled them, but they crippled the Vegas Golden Knights too, and now they're in the Final Four.
They just had depth. Vegas had depth. They had a lot of players producing and able to do different things, right? Ottawa did not.
Yeah, it's more. I'm also more referencing regular season because obviously
Mm.
Vegas is over the cap right now with Stone coming back. So yeah, that's a loophole, I guess. But like, if you're in a position where you can exploit that rule in the NHL's guidelines, then go for it by all means. And we'll see Vegas and Dallas tonight. I'm actually let's go quickly. What's your bracket like with obviously game one in mind for Panthers Carolina? Like who do you have in the final, and who do you have winning out of these four?
I think Carolina's going to win. I'm picking Carolina. I know they lost game one, but I don't know. I really like that Carolina team, and I like it because it doesn't have that much superstar talent. Like, you could argue that, but they don't have Sveshnikov right now. So, like, their top scorer was Natchez with 71 points in 82 games this year. And I don't know. I like the narrative of depth. Like, I like a team that's just built for depth, and they're not just built around the Toronto Maple Leafs star players. Like, I say them because they're just notorious for building this star core who's really like strapped them cap wise. I'm gonna pick Carolina to win, and I'm gonna pick. That's hard between Dallas and Vegas. I'm gonna go with Dallas. I think it's gonna be Dallas Carolina, and Carolina will win in the finals.
I'm going to take Vegas over Carolina. I do think the Canes will come back, but I mean, dude, Florida's lost one game since game 4 against Boston.
It's
They're like
insane.
whatever that is in one. So they're doing well and can't count any of them out. So just quickly, we are recording after Kyle Dubas has been officially out as GM in Toronto. So they're screwed. That'll be fun to follow. And like Brennan mentioned, we got a members pod dropping tomorrow. Just so keep an eye out for that. This has been episode 8 of the Everyday Sens podcast. Thank you everyone for joining in, and we will see you guys on Monday.